What's up, everyone? It's Vin here from the Diamond Geezers, your gangrene geezer, talking about all things Jets, bringing a little Christmas cheer to this podcast because God knows the Jets aren't doing it. So, what we'll talk about today, we're going to briefly cover the last game against the Saints. We'll talk about more so the news and notes of the week, and then we'll finish up talking about the upcoming game against the Patriots. The news from the game, more of the same. It's just more of the same. I'll get into what I've been hearing about Aaron Glenn and other things for the team as we get into the news and notes. But to talk about the game, it's more of the same. Brady Cook has showing he has no pocket presence. Eight sacked 8 times in the game. I saw there was one play where he rolls out to his left, easily could just throw it out of bounds. Instead, he just hangs on to it and takes a sack. So for all those pundits, the talking heads who are out there saying that the Jet offensive line is overhyped, sorry. Maybe 2 of the 8 sacks were on the offensive line. The rest of it's on the quarterback, just hanging on to the ball too long. Kind of what Justin Fields was doing earlier in the season. The difference between the two of them, Fields first round draft pick. This guy is an undrafted free agent who got no play and when he was an undrafted free agent. Pretty much the only team that showed him any love was the Jets. The defense, the team hung tough for a little while, but look, flat out they're outmanned. I know talking about the Saints. Saints only had 4 wins themselves going into the game, but they've been looking better lately. It looks like they may have found their quarterback of the future in Tyler Shuck. Their defense still plays tough. It was in New Orleans, which is also a tough place to play under any circumstances, let alone a Jet team, which this is kind of, I'll segue into the news and notes here. When you hear all these talking heads and people who either get paid to cover the team or who speak about it like I do, they'll list off a laundry list of reasons. I know that the Jets are playing all these undrafted free agents. I know they're playing 3 or 4 guys on defense that might be starting for them next year or would start on any NFL defense. I know there's an undrafted free agent at quarterback. I know your number 1 receiver's down, and on and on and on. So they list all these, and they're not excuses. They're just flat out reasons. Sometimes things are not excuses. They're just reasons as for why things are happening. You're going out there outmanned every week. They list all these things, and then they jump on them for why they're not playing better, why they're not winning, why any of these things should be surprising to anybody watching it. They're outmanned. They're playing out there with all heart with what they have, but what they have right now is just not much. Let's just face facts. It's not much. They're going out even against New Orleans, where I know everybody's saying, well, they got a first year head coach, but you know what? Their defense has more talent on it than this Jet defense. Please stop with what the defense was under Robert Saleh. It's not the same defense. It's not the same players. It's not the same scheme. It's completely different. It's not nearly the same level of talent they had under the previous regime. So stop comparing the two. This was a defense that started their decline last year. And they're continuing it with under Wilkes. Now, obviously, he's been fired, but running a scheme that wasn't conducive to the players that he had. Again, as we've talked about, it's not any surprise that the players who were thriving in this scheme, and there weren't many of them, these were players that were brought in after the fact, like Briggs and Phillips and Brownlee before he got hurt, because they thrive in this scheme. Not so much the smaller players, the smaller linebackers, the smaller quick players, which are more conducive to the attacking style was under Saleh's scheme. And that, again, as I mentioned, had played out previously when Saleh was hired by the Jets and Wilkes took over in San Francisco. That defense was barely mediocre, and it had been a top-level defense under Saleh because the players that Saleh likes for his scheme do not match what Wilkes tries to run. You want to get on Glenn for not identifying that when he hired Wilkes? Fine, you can definitely get on him for that. Can't get on him for for hiring Wilkes. I didn't hear anybody screaming about it at the time. They People were like, "Oh, great, former head coach, so he has some experience, so Glenn can turn to him if he had any questions." That was pretty much the theme of the Wilkes hiring. Um, Jumping into and then just going to the firing. I give him credit for firing Wilkes. I thought he would do it after the season. I give him credit for doing it. This past week, Mike Florio got a lot of buzz with stating that as Glenn being a defensive minded head coach, firing the defensive coordinator that he hired, maybe he was a little bit too close to the fire and he might get burned himself, which is pretty much saying he could be a one and done coach. From what I can gather so far, that seems to be it was just simply his opinion. It's not coming from anywhere inside the organization, or else it would have been picked up on and run with by multiple people, and it hasn't. So I think that was, I don't know if he was clear. I don't think he was clear in stating that it was just his opinion. It obviously, I feel that it was. I think it was a little irresponsible for him to say that and not be clear that it was his opinion, especially when you're talking about a man's, a person's job. And I actually I applauded him in the last podcast for doing that, for not just saying, you know what, let's just stick this out for the next 3 weeks, see how it goes. Or worse, maybe in the off season, he would have then given us the story of, well, he didn't have his own guys and he didn't have the players that really fit his scheme. So we're going to bring in those players and see what a second year, or really a first year in his scheme with his players looks like. Guy's been one and done in his last few stops. I applaud him for realizing, you know what, made a mistake. This guy's not going to be the guy leading us into the future. Get rid of him now. Maybe Chris Harris. I don't know if you can call it an audition. 3 games. It doesn't give you much time to do anything because you're not going to change the scheme at this point. You might tweak it a little bit, but it is what it is. But also with Florio's statement, well, defensive-minded coach firing his defensive coordinator. Well, let's look back at Detroit, where the offensive-minded coach fired his offensive coordinator after the first year. And that was with them finishing fairly strong after a horrible start. They finished fairly strong, and he still fired him, and that's how he fired Anthony Lynn, brought in Ben Johnson. Not saying I would love if Glenn finds that equivalent on the defensive side for the Jets next year, and maybe he will. But you can't say it's not unprecedented. It has happened, and he did it in season. If he would have let it go for the last 3 weeks, now 2 weeks, I don't think anybody would have cared. But it's one of those things where it's like once he realizes it, and I applaud Glenn for this. He's been getting slack for this. I actually applaud him when he made the switch from Fields, when he fires the defensive coordinator. When you find yourself in a hole, I say this all the time, stop digging. Don't keep saying, "Oh, we'll stay the course, stay the course." Once you realize that course it's not going in the direction you want it to, that's your job as the coach. Change course, change the plan. I'm not saying just upend your entire plan if you have an overarching plan, but if there's tweaks you can make along the way, there's not always a straight line to get from A to B. There's going to be tweaks along the way. What you don't want to do is have these really, vast diversions away from your end goal while you're trying to get there. And this is not one of those, in my opinion. Firing Wilkes, who cares? He was going to get fired in a couple of weeks anyway when the season's over. So he did it in season. I don't care. I don't think it reflects in any way poorly on Glenn that he fired the defensive coordinator. If anything, I think it reflects positively that it seems like he and this leadership, when they realize if they made a mistake, they're fairly quick to try to rectify that mistake. Now, obviously, they won't be able to fully fix the defensive coordinator position until the offseason, but step one was obviously removing Wilkes. Again, something we thought was going to happen in the offseason, happen in season, so be it. But I don't think Glenn is going anywhere. All this noise about him possibly going somewhere, I don't see it happening. I think you don't know what you have in these guys after a year with the situation he's had. Just my opinion. You can't keep saying, "How do I have?" We want sustained success as Jet fans. That's what we want. We don't want oh, we made the playoffs this year, but we went for broke. We made the playoffs, kind of what we were trying to do with Rodgers. You go for broke. You try to make a run at it. If you're successful, which is the ultimate success, Super Bowl looks great. But when you're not, now you set yourself back even further. You want to be like the Pittsburgh Steelers of the world. I hate to say it, but the Patriots of the world, where their blips are short, but their expectations every year coming into their season is playoffs, potential shot at the Super Bowl. That's the expectation. Whereas the Jet expectation of a Jet fan is, please give us some hope. We don't want to be talking about the draft before Thanksgiving. And unfortunately, that has been the story for Jets fans for at least the last 5 years. And it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad. And I've seen a lot of bad football where some people are saying this is the worst football they've seen. That just lets me know, they haven't seen enough Jet football in their life to say that this is the worst they've seen because when you take in the totality again of everything, the level of talent that is on this roster at this time, and like I said, they played hard. I didn't see any quit in the team last week. They're just outmanned. They're outgunned right now. You see people trying to do too much, and that is a problem. When you're trying to do too much, you're trying to make a play, you're trying to jump routes, you're biting on, and it's just I don't know why. At least somebody doesn't talk to the players about that. They bite so hard on play action and misdirection plays where guys are running wide open because everybody else has already jumped out of their lanes on the defensive line and in the defensive backfield, like on the touchdown on Olave late in that game. It was a play action. They all bit so hard. Olave's just running free behind them for an easy touchdown. Again, these are young guys trying to put some good stuff on tape. They're trying to make something happen. They know the season's over. They know that people are just suffering along with this, and it looks like they're trying to do something, and it's just not happening. And then when you do that and you don't stay within what your responsibilities are, and you get outside of that, and everybody seems to be doing, or most people, multiple people are doing it on a single play. Now you have multiple people out of position. People are running wide open. You look like Keystone Cops, and it's bad. It looks bad, and the result is bad, and the results have been bad the last few weeks, and they're going to be bad the remaining two games. They're playing the Patriots, and they got the Bills, both two teams that are far more talented than they are. Um, they also have something they're playing for. They're playing for the division. They're playing for playoff positioning. So the Jets right now, I think they're going to get boat raced in both of these games. As a Jet fan, I'm simply hoping keep it competitive, play hard, try to keep it competitive. But at the end of the day, play hard and don't quit. Right now, you're playing for two things and two things only. You're playing for your teammates and the pride, and you're playing for your future, for your teammates. And it's like, look, you've been going through these battles, some of them multiple years together, others since the April, since Pat over the OTAs, months of battling, blood, sweat, and tears. It's gone bad, and it went bad pretty quickly. You're fighting for the man standing next to you because that's at this point that's all you have, and then you're playing for what you're putting on tape. Somebody asked Joe DiMaggio, why do you play hard every game, every inning, every at bat? And he said, because if there's a kid in the stands or someone sitting in the stands who's never seen me play before, I want that time that this person sees me play to see me playing my best and giving it my all. That's what the mentality that these play. You should always take that into every game, regardless of how you're doing. But definitely at this point, when it's hard to get up for these games, when your season's long over. But again, if you either want to be on this team next year or you want to put something on tape for the next team next year, 2026, people talk. GMs talk amongst themselves. What you put on tape will show. If you quit, if you dog it, if you just show, I gave up on my team, even when people could say I don't blame you, but they will blame you, and that's kind of unless you're just a top flight guy where people will look past it. That is something that could be held against you and actually cost you money in your pocket. So that's what they're playing for right now, this Jet team. Some more news and notes. Will McDonald, IR, out for the season. Some say his future may be in doubt with the team. Did he fit the scheme that Wilkes was trying to play? Does he fit whatever scheme Glenn wants to play and will look for in his next defensive coordinator? We'll see. That'll play out when the offseason rolls around. McDonald was very, 1 or 2 games this season where the reason or the accumulation of all his stats came out of 1 or 2 games. It's really hard to assess certain guys at a certain point when you're always playing from behind. You're very rarely in games, so it's not as if you're ahead or games are close where people are going to try to pass the ball, or there's certain situations which the Jets find themselves in, which is always trailing, which lets the defense just pin their ears back and come after the quarterback. The Jets don't find themselves in that situation often. So, and when they have, that's when he's had a little bit of success in the games that have been close and competitive, because there is a little bit of that predictability as to what the offense will do. But when you're getting just smacked around and teams are pretty much just running whatever they want, running the ball, running at you, which is not as strong suit to begin with, playing against the run. It's maybe not the great way to assess, but we'll find out. Some off the field stuff, which was a bad look for the Jets, which they did rectify, but it was horrible that it actually had to get to that point. It was a woman who won the competition, the kick at this week's game. It was for $100,000. It was a field goal kick competition, and I guess it turned out, or they learned that she is I believe, was a high school soccer coach. And I've had discussions with friends of mine on this, and I've told them I've seen this in other sports, in hockey and basketball, where it's part of the eligibility is you didn't play any level of basketball from high school or college or anything equivalent to that. So you can't be considered kind of a quote unquote trained athlete in that sport. And I don't know if that was a criteria for this competition, but even if it was, it's the week of the event. If it was and you missed it, tough shit that you missed it. This woman, and if I'm also not mistaken, she was doing this in honor of her father, who passed away. He was a lifelong Jets fan, season ticket holder, and she was doing it in his honor. I'm almost positive I got that right. And she's a teacher. It's not like this is a person who comes from, has means here to where this is no big deal. And then to cancel it the week of, she's going to kick this Sunday. And then she was reinstated after the huge backlash, just tone deaf all the way around by the Jets leadership. And this goes to Woody. I don't care if it was a lackey who did it, who made the call. You're the owner. This should be something that immediately should be. If you didn't know it, then that's a problem the way your organization is being run, because somebody would have to tell you this, because there would automatically be known that there's going to be backlash from the media about this, considering the fact that you keep raising ticket prices for this crap product that you're putting on the field. And now this was what was to be a feel-good moment. And even when it's mentioned, when it happens, there's going to be this caveat, this part of it's going to be mentioned, instead of it just being a completely all-around feel-good moment, and potentially, really, if she makes the kick, a fantastic moment for this girl, and give something to the fans, or the fan who may show up to watch this game tomorrow at MetLife. Just I don't I think it's going to be 75-80% Patriot fans at best. 20% Jet fans. I can't see any more than that. Give them some sort of a feel good moment in an otherwise lost and dreadful season, and you still manage to botch that. You managed to botch that. Totally tone deaf. Horrible, horrible job by the team. You get a small kudo, a small star for at least not just sitting there saying, which I think they earlier in the week was saying, well, we stand by our decision. Well, thankfully, I'm going to say, cooler, I don't want to say cooler heads, but the brighter minds prevailed and, common sense won out. And somebody just said, who cares? Hopefully, this is a great story. It should have. That's all. That's if anything, that's what you should have been hyping up because there's nothing else for you to hype up at this point. It's completely you're playing for draft position at this point, and that's another thing. I am just totally, sick and tired of everybody talking about. Well, they won 3 games and it was a meaningless game. The 3 games may be what gets you the number one pick, and they still have an outside shot at the number one pick if certain things break right between now and the end of the season. But you want to be top 2 because the thought is more will come out. Nobody thinks Simpson will, but more might. So if you have as long as you have 2 quarterbacks, you want to be top 2, at least top 3, because the thought would be if the Giants are in that mix, they don't need a QB. They have Dart that you can either make a deal with them or they're not going to take the quarterback. So that person will fall to you if you're behind them. So there's at least, but again, these guys haven't declared. Nobody knows what if these guys are even coming out other than Mendoza, who everybody's projecting will come out. But we don't. What happens if he has a shitty playoff or it gets knocked out in his next game and he says to himself, you know what? I want to come back. There's NIL money in college now, baby. They don't have to just run out for the money in the pros. He might sit there and say to himself, if his season doesn't end the way he wants it to, I want to come back and finish what I started. Maybe he comes back. And now you're sitting there, and none of these guys came out. And now that makes the 27. And that's another thing. Oh, next year's draft. And that's also what's nerve-wracking because last year people said this year was going to be a deep draft class at the quarterback position. And it turned out, no, that's not the case. A bunch of the preseason quarterbacks who people thought were going to be high up there either got injured or just played poorly to the point where they're not even being discussed. And they're talking about coming back. So you have it could be a better class in 27. I get it right now. You don't want I don't think the Jets will win. I think they're going to finish 3-14. I can't see any way, barring something we haven't seen in forever, not this year, in years, that they win one of these last 2 games. I know the divisional games, and I know divisional games are always crapshoots because you got the historical beefs where you never know what happens. No way do I see them. I honestly don't even see them being competitive in either of these last 2 games. I haven't seen what the spread is. If it's not double digits, that's criminal. In these last 2 games, they should be double-digit dogs in both of these games, and I think they're going to get just waxed in both of these games, and rightfully so. They should. They don't have the talent of either of these 2 teams, not even close, and they're not playing for anything but pride and draft position. I mean, the draft position, that's what we're saying. They are coaching to win. Sorry, everybody out there saying it doesn't make it. They don't care. They don't care about draft position. At least the players don't. The coaches shouldn't either. You don't I mean, if you're sitting guys like people are looking at Will McDonald and Justin Fields and other guys who you're not playing that you keep running Brady Cook out there when you probably could run Taylor out there and he might have a better chance of winning games than Cook did, that as your way of tanking. Are you kidding me? Have you watched this team? They don't have to try to lose. What have we been watching all year? What have we been watching for the last few years? They don't have to try to lose. The problem is, years ago when we wanted them to lose, they won that meaningless game against the Rams, and that cost them the shot at Trevor Lawrence. That's the type of shit they usually do. That's not what they did. They won 3 games. Honestly, if you go back to some of the early games, there's probably another 1 or 2 they could have won. So the fact that they have 3, they could have 5 at this point, 5 or 6. if a couple of those earlier games would have just went their way. You had the Tampa game, you had the Pittsburgh game, you had the Broncos game. All of those were winnable games. If they would have won one, two, three of those games, I mean, we're talking about somewhere in the upper to mid first round. What I'm happy about is let the Colts keep losing. Let's root for that, people. Let the Colts keep losing because that pick, which was projected at the time when the Jets made the trade because the Colts were riding high, that was projected to be. I saw some mocks having it 32, thinking they were going to win the Super Bowl, and I saw it into the low 20s, 28, 29, which is essentially a high second round pick. Now that pick is up in the teens, and if they lose out their next two games, which they very could lose out these next two games, if they lose them both, that might be the 15th pick, 14th, 15th pick. That's a huge jump from 32, 31, 30 late in the first round to the mid first round. That's a massive jump. Think about what kind of draft capital you'd have to give up if you had that pick and you wanted to move up to if I had the 30th pick and I want to move up to 15, what else would I have to give up to do that? In this case, nothing. Just keep letting the Colts flop and fall and it's all the better for the Jets. So, and which makes them potentially making moves in next year's draft even better because now that pick, which was maybe would have been again low first, could be looked at as a high second round pick if the draft is not too deep. Now that pick becomes a much more higher commodity to use to move. Whether you move up, use it to move up in the first round, or start moving around with your picks. The Jets need a whole lot more. And if again, we keep talking about this as if Mendoza is this surefire Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, Joe Burrow type of prospect. He was not. I've seen his comps as being Jared Goff and guys like that. Not really force multipliers. Some people have even talked about his personality. Does his personality really fit New York? He's like a little quirky. He's a little loud. I haven't seen much of him, but I'll leave it up to evaluators. I'm sorry. I think Muji had a strong draft last year. I think all his moves after the draft, the signings, the trades, the in-season moves have all shown that he has an idea of what he's doing. There seems to be a plan. Just because it doesn't, the problem is they're in year one, we're in year 15 of a playoff drought, and I'm 52 years old, so of a Super Bowl drought. So that's the problem. The Jet fan is on a different timeline than the current regime. And that's just the way it is. And we'll bitch and moan and complain because that's where we're coming from. We're coming from years of this shit. And they're just coming from, hey, man, we just got here. And I know people have looked at, Glenn keeps changing the goalposts. It was, we're built for this shit. We're here to win. Of course, but what is he supposed to say? Yeah, we're going to suck the first year. Yeah, we're gonna be shit. I don't know what this again. This is a team that won 5 games last year with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback. They have 3 this year, and they easily could have had 6. They're gonna finish with 3. I can't see them winning one of them. But again, this is not a team that won. This was right on the cusp of the playoffs last year. And if you think that they were, what moves happened in the offseason that made you think that this team was going to win more games than last year's team? That this team was going to be better than that team? Tell me. Leave it in the comments. I'd love to know what anybody saw to make them think this team was going to be better than last year's team. Zip. Nothing. Hope. That's all we had. It was the hope. We hoped it was. Please. We got a new coach. There'll be a bump. There'll be something. Nope. When you look at it realistically, the people, what Vegas have it, 5.5. There's a reason why they have the money they have there. They're pretty smart with these things, and 5.5 was probably ambitious. But in reality, when you look at it, what did I say earlier? They blew 2 to 3 games that they could have won, which would have given them 6 wins. So 5.5 was a pretty good setting for them, a pretty good prediction before the season started. It's not something I looked at. In my early season preseason predictions, I was drinking the Kool-Aid a little too much, and it's something we'll talk about when the season's over, when we revisit this debacle of a season that we just had to live through. But that's all we have left as Jets fans is when the season starts, it's the hope. Now at this point, I applaud the SNY crew. It's the same shit week after week, year after year. It's like, what do you talk about? What do you? It's ridiculous. There's almost nothing to say because at this point, it's like it's not even that they're bad. It's they're playing about as well as you can expect for what they're putting out on the field from a talent perspective. We are expecting a jump in talent next year with the draft capital they have, with the free agent money that they have. We are absolutely expecting a better product on the field next year, and we'll get into that as the weeks go on and we get into the off season and we start to see what moves they plan on making. But at the end of the day, what it will always boil down to, without a quarterback, you really can't say we're on the right track for anything. It's why you aren't in the mix for any of the top coaches. In the offseason, Ben Johnson went to Chicago with Caleb Williams. Cohen went to Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. Vrabel, New England with Drake May. Nobody was coming here for Justin Fields or Tyrod Taylor or whoever. You just didn't have the guy. So you not to say I think you made a bad hiring in Glenn. I like the hire in Glenn, but you weren't getting those guys, and it's not a coincidence that those teams are playing well because they're getting good coaching, but they're getting strong quarterback play. So that's should be the Jets' total focus in their plan. What's pinned to the top, whatever moves change underneath that pinned move at the top, solve the quarterback conundrum, solve the quarterback problem. And it's been every regime's problem since Joe Namath left. Somebody's got to solve this. And now falls on Muji and Glenn's lap. I'm not only here, but it's Woody's problem. Woody hires the guys. It's their problem now. If we find out in another couple of years, you're not, because no team has more resources over the next couple of years than this Jet team at this point of draft picks and money than a Jet team. These are for other franchises. These are the types of this kind of capital that can, if the moves are done well, this can catapult a franchise forward, where the Jets franchise could finally be that franchise where year after year your expectation is playoffs, Super Bowl, not dear God, the only way I'm in first place is if you hold the standings up in the tablet and then flip it over and then I'm in first place. That's what we don't want. We don't want the embarrassment. And I still walk around. I walk around my Jets gear. I tell everybody I'm a Jets fan because Jets fans, they're proud to be Jets fans. Even though this team doesn't give us anything to be proud about, it's a point of pride for us to be Jets fans. And why I also do it is because I'm waiting for the I told you so moment. That's going to be so sad. I remember it as a Ranger fan. I remember in 93, the 1940 chant that we used to hear all the time. And that, thankfully, I didn't have to live I was 20, 21 years old when they won. I didn't live through a whole lot of misery before they won. But I remember the 1940 chants. And when they won the Stanley Cup, people with the banners, I could finally die in peace. That's how I feel about the Jets right now. Living through it this long, and the Knicks at the same time. I'm a Knicks fan, by the way. Same way. It's like you live and die with what they're doing, but and you stay proud and you stay out there and you do stuff like I'm doing now and the other guys out there with their podcasts and all the fans that still go to these games and still root for this team and wear the apparel proudly, is because the day will come when nobody can call you the front runner. when they see you with the Jet jersey on. They'll know you were a Jet fan this whole time when that day comes where the tide finally turns. We're just waiting for that day. And a lot of the angst you will hear Jet leadership, Jet ownership from the fans and from the people who cover and speak about this team. It's coming from that place. It's coming from that place of, damn it, where's our turn? Where's our seat at that table? Why can't we do that? We see all these other teams around us do that. What is it? What is the reason that we can't do that? And until that point, that day comes, this is going to be the conversation that people have. And I'm hoping, again, here goes the H word. It's going to be the new 4-letter word when it comes to the Jets. Hoping that this regime is the right combination to finally get us into the place we want to be as fans. And like I said, real reason to cover the Patriot game. They should get boat raced in this game. There's no reason the Jets should be in this game. They might be in it for a half, maybe. Again, unless New England completely just shits the bed in this game. And there's like kind of what happened to Detroit the other day against Minnesota, where it was like 6 turnovers. Unless something like that happens in this game, I can't see the Jets being competitive, but maybe for a half. And maybe. And if they keep it close, I may not be totally surprised because, again, divisional games, that happens. It gets close. People get close. These things happen. But at this point, it's just right now, I don't want anybody who's in our – and also here's another thing. Anybody who's in our plans for 2026, please don't get hurt to the point where it jeopardizes your 2026 status to start the season. Finish healthy. You're likely going to lose the next 2 games. 3-14. We'll see what draft position that gets us in a few weeks. But until then, I'll be here giving you the recap, the news and notes, and all the previews. I thank everybody for liking and subscribing. Until next time, talk to you later.